Welcome. I'm Veda Florez, the host of Latino Marin. Today we have a special guest, Nancy McCarthy. She's running for the 2nd District Judicial candidacy. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience.
Can you tell me a little bit about your relevant background?
Yes, I've practiced law for over 30 years, and I'm practiced in not only California, but in Louisiana and in Texas. I practiced in federal courts and in state courts. I practiced before the Equal Opportunity Commission. I practiced before the National Labor Relations Board. I practiced before the Public Employees Relations Board, and various federal courts, including the 5th Circuit Court of Appeal and the 9th Circuit Court of Appeal, which are those courts that come right before the U.S. Supreme Court. And I am a member of the United States Supreme Court Bar as well. And I don't know, the exact specifics of where others who are candidates have practiced, but I know that it's a pretty broad background, and that I have, I believe, had more experience in more diverse areas than anyone I'm aware of that's running for this office.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What professional organizations are you a member of?
Well, I'm a member of the Marin County Bar Association, and I was on the board of that association for a number of years, and I serve on their Client Relations Committee and have for 10 to 15 years, where I serve as a hearing officer when there's disputes between attorneys and their clients over fees and that sort of thing. I'm a member of the California Bar Association, the Louisiana Bar Association, the American Bar Association, and as I've indicated, have been, appearing before a variety of courts that require your registering and participation and the maintenance of your abilities in that regard.
We are new in the election, and I'm wondering if you have any endorsements that you'd like to share with the community.
I do. I have a website that is going to go up, and it's very difficult to sort of pick a handful of people and say that those are the ones, but certainly one endorsement would be Barbara Lawless, who is probably one of the foremost employment lawyers in the state of California, who's argued many, many discrimination cases before the California Supreme Court. There's Dave Zabatini and Pete and Pat Aragoni, who are long time Marin citizens who have known me throughout the years, many years, and have been supportive of my activities, and I've been supportive of them. There's Diana Parnell, who is a local physician, and her husband, Francis Parnell. There's Dr. Archimedes Ramirez, a neurosurgeon, and there is, some of the members of the Latino community, including Mauricio Montano, who is very instrumental in the Mission Evangelica Pinal Church over in San Rafael, off Francisco Boulevard. People that I've worked with on many different issues in the past.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell me why the community should vote for you?
Well, fairness is sort of, and struggling for fairness, I sort of believe is in my genes. My grandmother came over to this country when she was aged 15 with her sister aged 14 from Russia, and she had nothing and was poorly treated, and she saved everything in her menial jobs and got a farm, and the next thing you know, the local lumber company was cheating her and most other immigrants on the board feet. My grandmother, who only had a 3rd grade education, was a very smart woman who spoke 4 different languages, and she figured out that she was being cheated, which was not an easy feat, and I don't know that I could do it today. But she went out and she took $5, which at that point was probably $1,000, and she employed Moses Cove, who had just finished his law studies, because then you didn't get a degree, and she paid him that $5, and he went out, and they won their case, and they were never cheated again. None of the immigrants who'd come to that area were ever cheated again. And my mother then went on, later on, afterwards, to testify in the 1959 McClellan trials, when Bobby Kennedy came to our house to ask her to testify, risking an awful lot because she was being forced to pay protection. And so my family have always believed, and I have been taught from a very young age, that no matter where things are going bad, where things are going wrong, that you can always go to court. And in that environment, you have your best chance of fairness, you have a record, and what I truly believe is that you need to have judges who hear all sides of the story. Not somebody who's just going to hear the prosecutor, not somebody who's just going to hear the defense attorney, not somebody who's just looked at one side of the issue for, their 12, 15, 20 years of their career, but somebody who is going to look at every side and have an understanding and a sympathetic ear to all of these sides. I've had a long legal career, and I believe that that experience and that interaction with people from all different walks of life is what's important. You have to have a sympathetic ear, you have to be understanding, and you have to have fairness at your core in order to be able, I believe, to be a good judicial candidate.
You mentioned something very interesting. Your mother had a third grade education.
My grandmother.
And this is something that the Latino community can relate to, is coming from a different country, having a lower grade education. And if I may ask, are you the first in your family to go to school?
Yes, fortunately, my siblings also went to school, but my mother did not. My mother and her sisters were all valedictorians, and her one brother, of their classes, and none could afford to go to school other than my one aunt, who had to travel to Iowa and had a full scholarship and ultimately became a chemical engineer, and then became the person who handled most of the patents at UC, the UC campuses. But she was the only one of that group of siblings that could afford to go to college. And the rest, fortunately for all of their children, were very hardworking and capable people who ultimately went on to either have businesses, but one thing that they all had in common was that they were great savers, and they considered education for their children the most important thing that they could possibly ever give to their children, and that's where they put their energy and their efforts. So I've got cousins, one who graduated from MIT with a PhD in physics, and you name it down the line. We've all been able to succeed because they worked so hard in their lifetimes and faced a lot of difficulties in order to be able to save the money for us to be able to go to school. That's what set us apart. That's what gave us our chance in life, was being able to have an education.
Mm-hmm. I value your strength and your educational background. Can you tell me, did you grow up in Ohio?
No, I grew up in upstate New York, a very small town that had about 800 people, probably still has about 800 people, but it was in the Catskill Mountains, which is a big tourist area. So in the summers, it became a town of 20,000 people because everybody from New York City came there in order to escape the heat. So that's where I spent, the first 18 years of my life, shoveling snow and, cleaning off the porch and getting ready for the next season, as is the case in the Northeast. And that's where I went to school. And then I, as I indicated, went south where it was a lot warmer, and went to law school there. So I've had the experience of living on the East Coast, in a small town, in the South, in a big town, and moved to California, where, of course, the weather is better than both of those places, and have found this to be, a great community where I have been incredibly involved in every walk of life. I served on the Oversight Committee for over $500 million worth of public bonds being spent in this county for the College of Marin to rebuild all of the high schools, Tam, Drake, and Redwood, and smaller schools, Edna McGuire. And I have raised over $65,000 for nonprofits. And so I've had a very public life in that I have donated a lot of my time for free to that type of work. In addition to that, I've done a lot of work, as either a judge pro tem or as a hearing officer for the bar or judging mock trials for the legal community. I have filed lawsuits that have secured voting rights in this community. I have written legislation that in fact saved over 70 public hospitals from private corporation takeovers that changed the face of what was going on at that time in California. In fact, it was passed unanimously by the legislature and put in as urgency legislation. So I feel as if I've not only been a lawyer and not only been practicing law and helping clients and living that life, I've led a life of public service, not only to the legal community, but also to the entire community in my work in supporting schools and the efforts that are needed to have citizens watch over how money is spent in this county.
Very good. Well, your value for education certainly shows, and many people, and especially in the Latino community, can identify with your background in working your way through school. So that's a valuable lesson to be learned for anyone from any community. Can you tell me how long you've been in California, and especially Marin County?
I've been there, well, that's the same answer. I've been in Marin County and in California since 1982.
In 1982. And what brought you to California?
Well, actually, it was my husband. I met my husband in New Orleans, and he was wonderful, and we had to make a choice, and the choice was going to be California. And so that was a great decision across the board, and we raised two wonderful young men, one who went to Yale, one who went to Columbia. So again, they also valued education, as did my husband and I, when we made sure that every effort was made to give them any opportunity that we could to do their very best. And so we were very blessed, that they did, and that they worked hard, and that they kept it all together, which is very hard for young people to do today. There's so many different choices and so many different, alternatives, and so we were very blessed that they took the route that they did. Wonderful, wonderful young men.
You've got roots here in Marin County. You've been on boards and commissions. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the community, and why it's important to vote for you, and why you think you would be the best candidate?
Well, I think that right now we see in our court system a tremendous number of prosecutors, people who used to be prosecutors, people who and some who are running that are prosecutors. And then we see people who are coming in who are from the defense bar and the criminal defense bar. And I think that when you've spent your whole life or your whole career doing one thing, that you develop a certain mindset. These are wonderful people, please don't get me wrong. But when you ask me what sort of sets me apart and why people should vote for me, I think that there are enough people who have a prosecutorial background, that are already judges. And there are the individuals who are coming in who are the public defenders. Well, what you will see is that when a prosecutor comes into court, they're not going to want the attorney who is now a judge that was the public defender. They're going to what they call recuse him. They're going to say, I'm using a peremptory challenge and I'm ousting that guy, and I'm going to wait for somebody else. That's going to limit the ability of someone to be able to practice for all of the community. It was sort of like Elena Kagan on the Supreme Court. She had worked for the solicitor and in the solicitor's office, so there were cases she couldn't participate in for a period of time. Well, when you have a certain bent or mindset and you've sort of practiced that way for a long time, it's really hard for people on the opposite side to say, oh, I think that this person's going to be fair and reasonable with me. And so I think that I come into the picture with concerns for both sides, having practiced on both sides, not with one viewpoint that I've lived with and breathed for 12, 20, 30 years. Mm-hmm. And I think that that gives me the ability to understand the other side, to have compassion for the other side, to recognize that there are two sides to a story, and that I will be more welcomed by litigants, people coming before the court. They won't be filing what they call a 170.3 motion to get rid of me. They'll say, here's somebody who has seen it all, has represented both sides, understands what both sides are, and she doesn't have a bias. She's not going to turn around and look at me and say, I represented somebody else for 30 years, and you know what, I know what the story is, and I'm not interested in your side. Mm-hmm. I mean, it only makes sense. Who would come into a courtroom that was accused of a felony, and their attorney says to him, well, the guy there used to be a prosecutor for 30 years. Do you think we should keep him or get rid of them? I mean, whether it's right or whether it's wrong, you make snap decisions. And so I think that having a broader perspective will add to the bench. Right now there are too many people that have, I don't want to say too many, but many of them have a prosecutorial background or have that type of a criminal law background. And you need people who know the civil law, because the backlog is really in the civil departments. Mm-hmm. It takes 2 months to get a motion heard in Marin Superior Court, whereas it takes, 14, 21 days in San Francisco or some of the other courts. And that is because there is a backlog in the civil courts. And you need to have people who deal with these day-to-day disputes in order to be able to move forward, not be recused, and be accepted by the litigants. And I think that my background qualifies me well to be the choice of the people who are going to be appearing before me, who have the opportunity to eliminate me if they want to or not. And so that's why I think I bring a different perspective and background to the bench. Plus, I'm a person who's practiced in many different jurisdictions. Mm-hmm. And I think that knowing the law in other areas, having dealings with other types of individuals, I mean, let's face it, the South is different than the West, and Texas is different than Louisiana. And so I think that my knowledge of comparative law, of las siete partidas, of the Napoleonic Code, all adds to the mix that I think gives me, a gestalt feeling about what the right thing is to do, in addition to just looking at a book and picking it out.
Mm-hmm. We just have a couple more minutes left, and I thought that we could use this time as a teaching tool. So many Marinites choose not to vote for a judge because it's too difficult. So can you tell us a little bit about the whole judge experience? So there's one judge for each of the districts, is that correct?
There's one judge for this office. There are a number of judges on the Marin Superior Court bench. This office is the only one where there's a contested election. So on the Marin Court bench, there are a number of lawyers, and each year, and sometimes it remains the same, certain lawyers are assigned to the criminal bench, so they handle only criminal matters. Certain are assigned to the civil bench, where they handle only civil trials and civil matters, and certain are assigned to, like, the family law, juvenile law area, so that they are hearing primarily family law, divorce, and juvenile cases. And so what has happened for many, many years is that now there were, I think, 5 positions open, and no one ran for the other 4 positions because there was a sitting judge there. What has happened, or happened in that instance, is where the governor makes an appointment. And so I think one judge was appointed maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and one judge was appointed maybe 6 or 7 months ago. And nonetheless, when you are dealing with a sitting judge, very rarely will other lawyers in the community seek a position against them. It's really, it's like, well, you have to go out and face that person, the next time you go to trial, but it's just very difficult to deal with that. And so here we have an opportunity, and not to say that these weren't fabulous judges, because they were excellent candidates and that were selected, but it's just not the way things are done. And in this instance, it is a wide open field, and rarely does that happen, which is why you have so many candidates. In fact, I supported Faye Diopel, the judge who's retiring, in 2004 when she ran, which I believe was the last time they had a wide open election. So this is pretty unique.
We've just got 30 seconds left. What are the top 2 things that voters should look at, in just 30 seconds, that voters should look at when they are voting for a judge?
They should look to see what their background is and whether or not they have varied experiences on both sides and have not spent an entire career only representing one side or another. Because I think that will give everyone a feeling that they have had the breadth of experience and the open-mindedness that is needed to go forward with the tasks before them as a Superior Court judge.
You're an excellent person to talk to. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your candidacy to join us here at the Latino Marin, and I wish you success on your candidacy.
Well, thank you.
Latino Marin weaves the Latino experience into the fabric of Marin County. We are advocating and educating our Latino community. We're also donating laptops to students. Our goal for next year is to donate 500 computers. If you have a gently used laptop with a newer operating system, please contact Latino Marin at latinomarin360@gmail.com. We also have a sister website called Voto Marin. You'll find PowerPoint presentations, what's on your ballot, dedicated information about Latinos voting in the United States, California, and Marin County. Thank you very much for joining us, and please visit our website, latinomarin.org, votomarin.org. Follow our Twitter feed at Latino Marin 360.